welcome. I'm Jill Jonathan with Red, Wine, and Blue, and we are a community of women who use digital media and friend-to-friend organizing to change the world one suburb at a time. And one way we do that is through conversation. And so we have all kinds of conversations on our social media platforms. We have conversations through different events that we have that are always free and they're always online. So definitely check us out at redwine.blue. Today we're going to talk about extremism coming into our school system, especially Florida. So Joe, as in JoJo from Jersey, our favorite mom from Florida, Ray Ingram, will be joining us as well. And Ray works with Red, Wine, and Blue. She's a national organizer with us, and she's a doula too. We've had a conversation with her about that. So I like to, and you know what? Ray's an overall badass. I'm like, she's a Florida mom. She's our deputy director for our national team. She's a doula, and she's just an overall badass. So can't wait to have her join us. And then there's Joe. So hey, Joe, hi. She's a badass also.
Oh, thank you.
I love it. I love the Jersey hair, summer hair. I think it's very cute.
It's an exercise in futility to try to do anything else with it because it's going to end up looking like this no matter what I do anyway, depending on the weather. So it's just not worth it. Yeah, it's as crazy as
oh my gosh. And I think I'm just waiting for Ray. Just once you join, just let me know. It's easier to find. There she is. Okay. All right. Hopefully she'll pop up here in just a minute, but I mean, it's summertime and we are talking about school curriculum. There she is. Hey, Ray.
How are y'all doing today?
You know, it's Friday, so that's good.
Yeah,
but I'm like, it is summertime and we are talking about the craziness coming into our school curriculum. I live in Ohio. Listen, it's not just Florida. Like I was telling you, Ray, I was like, Florida's going off the rails, but there are people in other states like Ohio that are like, yeah, we think that's a great idea. Bring it along here. So deep breath. Excuse me. Let's just go into it. Yes. I'm like, okay. Let's just go into it with what's happening in Florida. And Ray, if you just want to start off and let us know, like, what in the world?
Well, I'm sure you all have seen all the headlines that the new curriculum that essentially K through 12 students would receive would characterize slavery as being beneficial to folks who were forcibly enslaved. And so, as you can imagine, it's really scary that the School Board of Education that makes policy for public school students approve this. Only one educator is actually on the state school board. So approving curriculum and only one person who has any education background is really scary. And I think it's quite obscene to say that slavery had benefits. And that folks received skills that they could take into the workforce after slavery. And so, as we all are aware, slaves or folks who were forcibly captured and enslaved in America had skills. That was the whole reason why they were enslaved. And so the fact that Governor DeSantis is pushing this extremist agenda, although when asked about this, he's like, oh, it wasn't me. However, we know that those are his allies and cronies that are making these policies. And so to me, it feels so preposterous and obscene to say skills are what slaves got out of the deal. Slavery was torturous, marked by marked by folks not having bodily autonomy, marked by lynching, marked by the legal way to keep people illiterate. So how are folks garnering skills being enslaved is something that I never would have thought I'd see in my day. And I'm like, oh, how far will we go how extreme
Mhm.
can you get? I mean, I thought that I'd seen some extreme things in Florida, but this by far takes the cake. And so as someone who is a parent and who is a taxpayer here and who supports our educators and public schools, I will do everything in my effort to fight back against this, because that is not curriculum. That is hate speech.
Mhm.
That is demonizing. It's like taking a, it's delegitimizing the experiences of my ancestors and so many other folks' ancestors. That no, we were already skilled, and that's why we were brought here and forcibly enslaved, is because we had the skills and taught skills to colonizers.
Right. And there's so many layers of the insidiousness to this. That's the first of them. It's that assumption that these people were just sitting on the shores of Africa, like just not able to do anything, just waiting for what they didn't know. And but no, that's not at all true, right? So they were skilled, as you said. That's what they sought. That's what they went looking for. They, those are the kinds of slaves who would probably get, a better sale price, etc. So there's that assumption, but there's also all of this is part of this agenda to whitewash history. And I can't speak obviously for you to walk in your shoes, and I cannot imagine what all of this must feel like, especially in the state where you live. But this idea that is the mantle for all of this whitewashing, that they don't want teachers teaching students anything that they might feel personal responsibility, guilt, anguish, or other forms of psychological distress for actions of the past committed by their own race. This is like the mantle of the Stop Woke Act, which is nonsense. And that's what this is resting on, this thing that DeSantis keeps both denying and not accepting responsibility for, but it's a direct answer to him removing African-American AP studies, etc. But I did not grow up learning that I should feel necessarily, I didn't feel personally ashamed for the atrocities committed to Africans during slavery. I felt that I was aware of the atrocities so that hopefully our generations to follow would never repeat those mistakes in history. But their whole idea is this is making kids feel bad about their whiteness. And I think that is so incredibly dangerous.
Absolutely. And I think that to deny that white supremacy exists is ridiculous. I don't think that the new proposed curriculum even says white supremacy in it whatsoever. I think racism, the word racism, is mentioned once. And so it's like it happens on so many levels. To just exclude it excludes our history. That's all. I mean, it's documented. I mean, we have the 13th Amendment for a reason. The 3/5 compromise is there and is a historical piece of legislation that is real. And so to deny these things that our government has documented, and I mean, in some ways, claim responsibility, not all the way, obviously, but to say that we shouldn't even acknowledge it is just really concerning. It's demoralizing, and it denies the impact of so many communities, not only Black Americans that were impacted by slavery, but anybody who existed at that time or their ancestors, because we all have been impacted by this, as many historians call it, the peculiar institution. And so I just feel like I would love to have a conversation with someone about why do they think this is the right path? Because we already know that our history and much of what we experience centers whiteness. And so do we have to go further to center whiteness? Do we really have to go further to dismiss the lived experiences of Black folks here in America? And so I am really concerned that this not only will impact folks who are descendants of folks who were forcibly enslaved, but will it go to, they're going to start denying facts of the Holocaust. Are they going to start denying facts of the women's suffrage movement? Like, I feel like it starts here and then it'll expand to so many other identities and communities. And so I think that it's incumbent upon us, regardless if we are a descendant of someone who experienced slavery or not, it's for all of us to speak up and say, hey, no, this isn't right. I want to make sure that the experiences of all people are taught and that we're teaching the truth to our students and not this phantasmagorical revisionist history that has no historical basis whatsoever.
That's right. And I feel like there's a fear there, don't you think? Like I don't know. I'm trying to, like, the younger people, the youth are like, no, we want to know the truth. We can handle it. We can handle the truth. Like, we want to know what's happening. And then what I've read and what I've heard is that, there's a fear that, white students will, like, oh, they're going to hear this and they're going to feel guilty, but that's not what's happening. White students are hearing this and they're like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. What can I do? Like, how can I be a better person? How can I make sure this doesn't happen? Like, I just feel like there's so much fear of the youth and what the youth is trying to advocate for. And so it's like an indoctrination of like trying to keep the youth from, I don't know, being woke, being progressive. I don't know where this fear seems crazy to me, but I think there's a deep fear there. So just curious what you all think about that.
Yeah, I think it's an attempt to limit curiosity and intellectual freedom. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, let's just dumb it down. Mm-hmm. Like, no, it's like, let's give people options, the wide range of options to learn the facts about history. And if a parent doesn't want their child to learn something, they can say no. It won't be forced upon them. But I think that just the general issue just about slavery, it's woven into the fabric of our nation. We know that Black folks in America built many of these institutions, particularly like literally brick by brick, building buildings, building highways, introducing new crops into our agricultural landscape. Like, we were growing cotton and indigo in Africa long before it ever existed here. That's why we were brought here. And so I think that I am concerned that these conservative or right-wing people who may not even be parents, and I know the vast majority of them on the school board of education are not educators, are making decisions for young people who want to learn the history of where they live and the communities that exist there. And so I think that I wish they would do a panel on students in Florida. What do students in Florida want to learn? And I believe the vast majority would say, we want to know as much as possible about the history of all people, and that we cannot deny the history of a whole race of people simply because it's inconvenient or will make people fearful. Because I find, even in my circles, I have friends that are conservative or progressive across the spectrum, and none of them have ever told me, well, Ray, because I learned about history, I feel so much worse about myself. They've never said, they're like, oh, I'm so glad I know so that I can teach other people in my network or community about these atrocities and how we have to lift up the narratives of the most marginalized so that we have a fuller, more accurate picture of what society is today. And so I've never encountered someone saying, oh, Ray, I feel so bad. I think there is some sort of like compassion or empathy or a little guilt, but they themselves did not commit the atrocities, so they shouldn't be feel like they have to bear the weight of what happened in the past.
Yeah, and I think it's all sort of like part and parcel to this attack on the truth, but also the idea that limiting the access to information, particularly accurate history and accurate information, gives them the ability to craft a narrative in a way that's convenient for them. And it's kind of really sickening to think about it, but this feels a little bit like a trial balloon in a way, where there's, right? So it feels like they're pushing this one out, sort of not first. It's not first. This is nothing new necessarily, but it is very extreme. Like you said, you didn't ever expect we would be here. And honestly, it is shocking, even though nothing about what they're doing is surprising. It is still shocking. And Jill and I've had this conversation a lot about how it has to always continue to shock us, because once it doesn't, then we're desensitized to it. But that, I feel like, is the goal. So there's so many different aspects to it, because there's this idea of limiting information, because information is power, and then hoping that people will also be curious and not seeking the information they're trying to limit, which is not the human spirit and very difficult to actually suppress. They're going to have a harder time with that, as we know. But you know, it's that. It's also this idea that if they keep sort of putting these little trial balloons out there, eventually the hope is that we'll all be so whittled down and desensitized to all of it that the outrage will go away, that the shock will go away, and that they're able to accomplish more of this, like you said, with other marginalized groups, whether it's the transgender community or the Jewish community, and they'll have weathered away our spirit and tolerance for being able to stand up and say no, that they can just accomplish what they want. And I love, you know, having these conversations, particularly with Ray. And I love Jill, obviously, but you have such great insight here. And I love what you just said about how we have to keep speaking up. We have to keep standing up, speaking out and standing up. And we can't just get numb to this, right? Like we have to keep calling this out, because this is kind of like a starting point.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Then what follows,
and I
you know
think
what I mean?
that what I'm afraid that will follow is I've seen a mass exodus from educators from Florida, whether it be K through 12 or at the post-secondary education level. And there have been so many instances in the last couple of months where teachers and college professors and even, people are like not accepting their master's programs or PhD programs. They're like, I don't want to be in place where my intellectual curiosity will be limited, or I might be reprimanded or even like punished or stripped of my licensure or whatever it is, because I'm teaching about systemic racism. Like, I think that there's some, I was actually reading an article from the Orlando Sentinel this morning, and it was saying that that it restricts universities on what they can say about systemic racism. And so you can be a teacher in a classroom, you've been doing this intellectual work, been peer reviewed by so many people across your field, and then can't even like publish your research, or people might not be able to even defend their dissertations because they're afraid that if they use certain words or rhetoric, they may not receive their degree, or they may, lose their job. And so I think altogether these recent discussions have shown us that folks will go to no end to promote an extremist agenda that clearly excludes people. It's not about belonging. It's not about democracy. It's really about control and about limiting information. It makes me feel almost about like, George Orwell's book 1984, or even thinking about Fahrenheit 451. Like, it makes me think about these dystopian societies or these phantasmagorical worlds where we're limiting information, or only a select few can have it. And so I am deeply concerned, and I know so many people are, and it just feels like Florida, just like every week, we just keep on coming up with the with the things that keep us spicy.
I mean, I think like what you said, Joe, because I'm like, well, everybody's like, what can we do? What can we do? Well, number one, we can stay outraged. I think that's part of it. Like, you have to stay outraged. And then, Ray, I had asked you before we got on if you knew, and you were like a little bit about this, but some things that we've been talking about on Red, Wine, and Blue, and I went to the rabbit hole of what PragerU is.
Right.
I'm like, that's terrifying. In Florida, this is like a non-accredited curriculum, and Florida is like, yeah, we think we'll allow our public educators to use this type of curriculum. And that really terrifies me. And I know PragerU is like trying to go more into broader, not just Florida. And I live in Ohio, and I could see parts of Ohio that are like, yeah, we'd like to teach what PragerU is teaching. And it's whitewashing of history. It's a limited view of education.
Absolutely. There's an organization that we actually had featured at a salon at Red Wine and Blue several months ago called Save Your Six, which is a California-based group to help protect the protections under Title VI around race. And I would be interested to see if the approval of this PragerU curriculum is in fact against Title VI, because it would seem as though to me that having such an exclusionary curriculum would not be consistent with the type of public education standards that could even be approved. It just feels very much like there wasn't enough due diligence put forth, and the fact that they're unaccredited. How could an unaccredited institution contribute curriculum to public schools? And these are schools that get tax dollars. And so there has to be some sort of set of standards for what curriculums can be accepted. And so I think that there's going to be some more interrogation that needs to be done on, like, how did they get that contract? Because it definitely feels like there was some very unsavory and illegal practices at play there, because there's no way an unaccredited institution should be able to contribute curriculum to any school board or anything. It's one thing if it's a private organization or something like this, but this is like the state school board that's adopted this curriculum. And so I'd be interested to see what the standards are in place and what does that process look like. I'd really like to demystify that, not only with how that happens here in Florida, but any of the states. Like, how do state boards go about selecting curriculums, and what are the standards that those vendors or providers have to meet? Because you would think it'd be higher than they can be unaccredited. This makes no sense to me.
It doesn't make any sense, right? But and I think it's definitely worth exploration, because I don't know enough about it at all, and I'm curious about what the Democrats and independents in Florida are doing in response to this, because it can often feel like, from the outside looking in at Florida, I call him Lord Farquaad of Florida, because it feels very fascist, very fascist, very authoritarian, very one-party rule, because it seems as though, given what DeSantis has been able to do, that there's very little resistance or pushback, because they have a Republican majority in the legislature, I believe, right? So, I mean, he was able to do what he did to the AP African History. He was able to create the Stop Woke Act. You know, it feels like there are no checks on him. And he had that attack on math books, I think, a while back, and they took those math books away. He's able to take books off the shelves from the teachers' rooms and from libraries as a whole. That's one of my creaky old doors. Sorry if that was on there. But it is a really good point that and that Florida can feel as though there are no checks and balances, but also because other red states with governors who are like-minded often use Florida as a roadmap to set the path for them for what they're going to do in their states. And like Jill said, this isn't going to just be exclusive. It isn't already just exclusive to Florida. But yeah, I wanted to go back to that. Do you know what are the opposing political? What are the Democrats and the independents? What are the other legislators saying about all of this related to Stop Woke and this thing?
I know that actually the Florida Democratic Party just kind of had a rebrand like 2 weeks ago, and we're like, oh, we're rebranding. We really want to reframe what our agenda and platform is. And so I know they've been organizing vigorously to make sure that they protect the seats that we currently hold and are able to perhaps flip some seats. But I don't think that they've come out with a path for this is how we take action per se. I know that it's like in the works, but I haven't seen anything in recent days about like what the coordinated response will be besides fight back, support the folks that are in there who fight for the public interest for real and who do want the truth being taught in schools. I think also something that I've been seeing is that a number of organizations have been saying, well, if they won't teach it to our students in the public schools, it's incumbent upon us as neighbors, as parents, as community organizations to teach the truth. Because right now, we don't know what's going to roll out when school starts in August. I mean, and even if it does roll out, we still have to make sure that young people have the resources outside of the school setting to support their development, to make sure that they are learning the truth. And so I've definitely seen a number of community organizations, many of our allies say, well, if it's not going to be offered in the schools, we're going to offer it in community. And I think that that community care component will be so critical in making sure that we hold our legislators accountable too, because while we do have a Republican majority led legislature, there's got to be some folks that are willing to walk, that are working across the aisle. Everybody can't be deranged. Everybody can't be invested in this. And I think that also with the School Board of Education, that's just a set group of people. So the legislature, I mean, while they work in tandem together, this body made that decision on their own. And I need to find out exactly what the legislature can do to possibly block the implementation of that, that curriculum. So I think there's a number of pathways forward here in Florida. I am hopeful, but I'm also quite enraged because it's like, sometimes I'm like driving down the street or I'll be at Publix and I'm like, are the people I'm walking around think that my ancestors were gaining skills, or do they really believe that I'm non-human? Like, I really wonder sometimes, because I do live in the conservative area, but I mean, in Jacksonville, we just had the first Democratic woman being elected mayor, Donna Deegan. So there are some glimmers of hope. I really hope that folks that are progressive and that do believe in teaching the truth will have a proactive, coordinated, and holistic approach to addressing this preposterous assertion that slaves were learning skills and that there were some benefits to being enslaved. And the fact that they can say these things with a straight face is really scary, because if they'll believe that, or if they'll promote that, what else will they do? Because this feels like the last bastion of hate that they could do, but I feel like it could get more hateful. And so I would encourage folks to invest in learning about history on your own and supporting community organizations that are going to teach the truth regardless, whether that be Zen Education Project or the Florida Reads Project, or helping organizations like Dream Defenders, any number of organizations that are Florida-based, or the ACLU for that matter as well. I know that they are working to fight back on this, but it's so fresh and brand new. And I think that folks also were taken aback, like, how do you even respond to this? It really came out of nowhere. We knew that there were going to be some more extreme things come out. We thought the AP history thing was one thing, but for it to go this far, I don't even think this is like right wing. I think this is just like out of like the universe from like some other planet or something, because there's no way that they thought that this was going to go over well, or that the vast majority of Floridians would accept such delusion.
The vice president was obviously moved. Vice President Harris was moved enough
to Jacksonville this Monday
to go to Florida and call this out. Yeah, and because, like you said, it does kind of feel like it came from outer space, because it's so not grounded in any possible logic that it's just it's that far afield. And it really is.
And I saw somebody commented, like, vote for your school boards. Like, pay attention to who's on your local school board, but also state school boards, which is something that, I'll be honest, like, I started paying attention to local school boards a few years ago, but state school boards is something you have to pay attention to also, because, like, in Ohio, they're trying to take the power out of the state school board and put it under the governor, which, it's like what you're saying. It's like people who aren't even educators, who do not have the background of education, teaching education, who are making decisions like this, which is just like from another planet, honestly. It's just bonkers.
It's like letting a plumber do your hysterectomy. Like,
That's an analogy.
Why would you do that?
That's an analogy. Relatable analogy. Very much relatable analogy.
I mean, yeah, I think it's stay outraged.
Exactly.
Make sure that you, and like what I said too, I was like, my kids, if they lose this kind of education in public education, they're still going to I'm going to figure out other resources for them to get it. So figure out the other resources and, vote at local school boards and state school boards.
Yeah, I definitely think that we really need to bring more attention to the role and function and power of state school boards, because so often, I mean, we know who the folks are in our local community, or at the county level or something. It depends on, how your jurisdiction manages that. But I think the state school board process is shrouded in mystery for me, for sure. And I think that we have to pay attention to that because, I mean, very rarely, I don't think I've ever seen a yard sign for a state school board candidate, but they're running or they're appointed. And so usually there's some combination of appointment versus being elected. And so I definitely think that that's something that we can explore in our programming here at Red, Wine, and Blue. Like, what's going on with state school boards? Like, how do they happen and function? And I think it varies from state to state, but folks need to know, and we need to make sure that educators, parents, and concerned community members are running for these offices because they want the best for our children, and they want to make sure that we have inclusive, holistic, age-appropriate content for students and for educators to have the freedom to teach those topics too. And so I am really fired up as per usual in Florida. It's like Florida man, no, Florida school board. Florida, the full state. It's not even just Florida man that's just off the chain. It's at all levels.
Yeah, it's true. And it's funny because Florida feels like it jumped the shark. But I often say that, and I really believe this, that democracy, especially now, is a daily practice. I really do believe that. And what I love about working with Red, Wine, and Blue is that while it's really easy for a lot of us, and I'm very guilty of this, as many people would know, of looking at the shiny objects at the top that get all the attention, right? So like they're up there getting noise and getting attention, getting clicks, and everybody's outraged. And I do it, believe me. But they're doing all of that really they can't actually make as much of an impact and do as much damage up there as the people at the very, very bottom, at the foundation of all of this. And what's the foundation of all of this? Something I know I've been remiss in paying attention to in my life in the past, and that is our school boards. That is local as it gets. That's the foundation. And if you start to dismantle that, then everything at the top relates back to that, and you can achieve whatever you want. And so the power of Red, Wine, and Blue, something that I'm so proud of and excited about, is that we don't look at just the shiny objects at the top. We have these conversations. We have amazing voices like yours to keep calling this out. And we have, Jill out there also giving people ways to get involved at the bottom of the foundation. And I feel like it cannot be overstated how important that is, because again, democracy is
democracy is not a spectator sport. You got to be in the game. You got to have skin in the game.
And a lot of us took that for granted for a long time.
It's we the people, not we the spectator.
I was just saying a lot of us took that for granted for a long time, me included. And that's, I have 2 school-age kids, so education is super important because I've got kids in the public education system, but also I understand that our youth are our future. And so if we're limiting what they can be taught, that's really scary. So that's why we've got to keep being outraged and keep speaking out against it. And Ray, I'm just curious, before we drop, if there are any events that that are coming up with Red, Wine, and Blue that people might be interested in joining.
Oh, absolutely. And so I definitely want to encourage folks. We have, please visit redwine.blue/events. We really want Ohio to vote no for the special election on August 8th. And so we are running a number of virtual phone banks and activities for folks across the United States to call women and our allies in Ohio to make sure they cast their vote. Go ahead and vote early or vote on election day. It's so important that we vote on these important measures in Ohio. So we have some stuff coming up for that. We'll also be doing in the coming weeks, as a part of our Freedom to Parent campaign, we'll be having we'll be adding them to the website today. So be on the lookout. We'll be adding a session called Black Moms, White Suburbs. We'll have a panel of Black mothers from across the U.S. talk about their experience being suburban moms, and to dispel the myth that the suburbs are just white. We know better than that. And so we're going to dispel that myth and talk specifically to Black mothers in the suburbs. And then that same week, we'll be having an event on how to, it's going to be called Troublemaker Get-Togethers. We want to really show folks, how do you get folks together, whether it's around an issue, a candidate, or just to get together to just have, like, you know, wine and talk about issues or watch some sort of progressive show. And then the following week, we'll have a panel as a part of our Ask Me Anything series, also with Freedom to Parent, as a panel called Faith and Reproductive Freedom. We'll be talking to a Baptist pastor and a rabbi about interfaith connections and how their work in faith has helped them help promote and fight for reproductive freedom and justice. And so we've got a number of things on the horizon. We're updating the sites today, and so be on the lookout for those things. And we're really excited about the programming we have and just all of the exciting things that we have for folks to get involved, because we really want to empower folks with as much information as possible. We are cultivating a community. We have our community on Sweep and several state Sweep pages as well. So I encourage folks to visit our website to listen to our podcast. We also have a limited podcast series called The Cost of Extremism, featuring our very own Jill as the host. And so I'm excited about what August has on the horizon. And I know that The Cost of Extremism definitely will discuss many of the topics that we even just touched the surface on in today's conversation. And so tune in, y'all. We've got lots of things on the horizon, and we'll be here to continue having these important conversations. And I'll come back as long as you'll have me whenever.
Always. Yes. Thank you so much. I didn't know about some of those events, so I'm very excited about that. And yeah, The Cost of Extremism will be, our first episode will drop next Wednesday, August 2nd. So definitely check that out. I'm very excited about it. It's been incredible. So thank you everybody for listening. And then as always, Jo is JoJo from Jers. She's still on Twitter. She's still there. And she's on Instagram, Threads, I think everywhere. So yeah, definitely check her out also. And you know what? It's Friday, so let's finish strong and get some rest this weekend. So, all right. Bye, ladies. Thank you for joining.
Have a good one. Thanks.
Thanks, Ray.